Okay, today we're going to talk about strategy books and the top three strategy books ever written. I excluded 48 Laws of Power because it's too recent and hasn't been read for centuries, and these other books have been read throughout history by some of the greatest leaders, you would say. I don't know if any of them are great. I think they all have their flaws, but if people in power are reading these books, then they're using these to their advantage. And why not at least understand what people are doing to you? I think that's the number one way to approach strategy. Understand where people are using sort of tactics to get one over on you, and I think if you can understand that, then you're well on your way already. So the first book is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. People don't know if Sun Tzu is a real person. It's speculated that he is. Nobody knows. He might be an amalgamation. Nobody really knows about the origins of this book. They just know it was read for millennia, and it has been read by pretty much every world leader throughout history. It really is a good book. If I had to summarize it, it's sort of the philosophy around war, the sort of principles that can be followed in any strategic situation, the principles that could apply to a medieval or a soldier a few thousand years ago, as well as a soldier today. The ones that really stick out to me are always fight an enemy on your terms, not on theirs. So if you have to, provoke them to attack you and allow them to overextend themselves and then take advantage of that. Never fight an enemy on death ground where their back is against the wall, where they're a caged animal, where they are forced to leave everything on the line because, of course, that is going to hurt you in the long run. Never prolong a war. There's never been a state that has benefited from a prolonged war. All sorts of things like this that are super, super fascinating. And perhaps the most interesting aspect of this book is how it carries over to life as well. There's a section where it says, always surrender when you can, regroup your forces, and then, attack again. Never allow someone to surrender. Always completely destroy an enemy so that they can't, in the end, turn back and stab you in the back. And these are all things that make a whole lot of sense, especially in the business world as well. Like, these are things that you see that are applied by companies on a daily basis and things that have allowed companies to flourish. And, I don't necessarily think it's the most ethical thing to do. I don't necessarily think that, it's something that you should strive on a daily basis to do, but conflict is going to arise, and knowing how to engage in conflict, knowing how to get your way out of it, knowing how to make the best decision is always going to benefit you. So, as Uncle Ben says to Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think reading this book is just, it's a fun thing to read. It really, I don't know if it's going to offer you anything that's going to change your life, but it's very fascinating. And if you start to apply some of these things and start to keep some of these things in mind, it's going to be very beneficial to you. The next thing we have is not as popular of a book. It's the Book of Five Rings. I would say it's not as popular because it's very philosophically and spiritually deep, and we live in a very, very shallow society, in a very shallow world that oftentimes likes to neglect the deepness and the richness of life. So very simply, the Book of Five Rings follows earth, water, wind, fire, and then the void. I'll explain the void at the end, but more or less they're different philosophies on how to master the art of swordsmanship. But what makes this book very, very interesting is that Miyamoto Musashi, very, very interesting guy. He was a samurai who's known as the best samurai ever, beat 60 guys in combat or something all by himself, like all sorts of legends and stories. And you can go into the history, it's very fascinating, but at the same time he was also a great poet. For the last 16 years of his life, he lived in a cave and wrote poetry and devoted his life to that. And very, very interesting. It has some very good spiritual implications. But the greatest thing he ever said to me is that once you know the way, you see it in all things, which basically states that if you could master one thing, you can master anything. If you could understand how one thing works, then you can understand how other things work. And I think this is such a deep concept, and I think this is something that we should all strive for, because when you achieve proficiency in something, then you can achieve proficiency in other things. You can carry that excellence, that skill over to the other aspects in your life. And it truly is a philosophy that if you carry into the world, you're going to have a whole lot of success. But back to what I was saying about the void. Once you master the four elements, once you master the four aspects of life, then you enter the void. You enter the idea of wu wei, the idea of effortless action, where things are just occurring, where things are just happening, where you're just witnessing, where you're merely performing the instincts and the motions, and everything just all comes together. And it's that state of creativity, it's that state of play. It's when you do something and you completely forget about things. And I think in the section of the void is some of the most interesting stuff of this whole book. It's very, very short. I think this copy I have is around 50 pages. It's literally like a pamphlet. I really, really urge you to pick up this book over the other two. I think the other two are more Machiavellian, more, oh, I'm going to do this to manipulate people, or I'm going to take advantage of that kind of stuff, where I think the Book of Five Rings is really a spiritual experience. It's really an alchemical experience of purifying yourself into something better, improving a skill and getting better, and becoming something that you previously weren't, and becoming who you were meant to be. Last thing we have is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. This book is very interesting history. It's very... people have one of two opinions on this, that the whole world operates off this book, or this book is evil. I think those are the two interpretations of this book. The funny thing is, nobody knows if Machiavelli wrote this as satire or not. Machiavelli was known to be a trickster. He was known to be somebody that was kind of a loose cannon, and he wrote this book as a gift to... I can't remember the name of the guy he wrote it to, but basically the leader of a city-state. I can't remember. The Medicis, one of the Medicis he wrote this for, and it was really a manual on how to be a good ruler. And the essence of this book is that, if you take it seriously, the essence of the book is that you put the state before everything. And there's a very famous quote that summarizes everything that this book has to offer. It's better to be feared than loved, but not hated. And that's a very interesting idea, because what makes a good ruler? What makes a good ruler is somebody that's respected, somebody that's listened to. There has to be some level of fear, because if there's no fear, then people just walk all over you. But at the same time, you don't want to be hated, because then people will be in open rebellion against you. And I think you see some of the greatest leaders, they have that element. They have this understanding. They have that ability to always kind of push the boundaries, but never become so hated that they're pushed out. And I think, this is one of the books that has been read and studied and picked apart for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. But overall, I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of focus on Alexander the Great and how he was able to keep hold of such a large empire, and it was basically because he became part of the civilization. He took over a nation, took over a state, and what he did was he accepted their gods. He made himself part of the mythology, and he basically engrossed himself in the entire culture, and basically didn't change the day-to-day lives of people. He changed the rulers, but didn't change anything about their lives, and in fact, he just made it better. That's only some of them. I know he did some bad things in other places, but again, very interesting book, and I think all of these books have something interesting to offer you, if not just the historical way that these things were approached, because the foundations of these books are really the foundations for modern political strategy and a lot of the political way that people maneuver. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of it, but I think it's just interesting to study, and I think it's interesting to point out where someone makes a Sun Tzu-like decision or a Machiavellian-like decision. I don't really see any Musashi-like decisions in politics, and maybe that's the reason why things are so bad. But with that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for watching this. If you want to read my book, first link in the description. If not, I still love you guys all the same. See you.